Very cool.
Okay, we are back again for part three of Iron John with Art and ready to go, I guess. Do you have we should maybe wait a few minutes for viewers to get here in
Yeah.
case.
I always like to give people till at least five after.
Yeah, let's do that. What anything new with you or anything you want to add about part three? We left him in the war was about to happen. The army was
Yes.
marching
Yes.
on the
The
castle on the king.
the king's boy had settled into the castle in part two. It's first the kitchen boy, and then got traded to the gardener's boy when he refused to take his tarbouche off in front of the king. And as the gardener's boy, he met the princess and was having a lovely little dance of courtship and friendship uh, through him bringing her wildflowers and her trying to see his golden hair.
Mhm.
And then, yes, word has come that war is on the horizon for the kingdom.
So that's where we're at now. Yeah, I remember the bratty little princess. um, I'm going to go ahead and post it on Twitter just in case. And then we can start. And then I put if anyone's watching and they want to join the discussion afterwards, I put the email in the chat. It's primalhex@gmail.com. Live now for part three. Okay. Okay, well, let's give it a couple more minutes.
Yeah.
So, what's new?
Ah, not a whole lot. Uh, got a couple more places that going to be putting out curriculum, which is kind of exciting. There's a
Oh,
lot of opportunities for community education programs for in their adult enrichment, and so going to be doing several online programs through that coming up. Be getting them teed up for the January season of the community education programs for
wow.
basically through school districts, K through 12
Oh,
school
is it going
districts.
to be in schools?
Well, it's their K through 12 districts have a lot of community education programs. And so,
Independent of the school?
yeah, so
Like,
it's sponsored by the district, but it's not in the schools, it's after school programming.
oh, but
And
it's through the district?
yeah. And so it's a lot of, on the kids' youth side, it'd be things like, archery lessons, 4 sessions for the next 4 weeks, and they
That's
pay
fun.
whatever for that. But there's also adult enrichment classes that they offer, which can be any kinds of miscellaneous things. I've seen meditation classes and yoga classes, cooking classes, hiking tours, and things like that for adult enrichment. And so, going to be, I've actually decided to craft a intro to the power of story program that would be 3 sessions long. And a lot of the inspiration from that actually came from this podcast of telling a story in 3 parts and showcasing feeding the story as one kind of focus for 1 session, and then the power of story, the stories we tell ourselves and the stories we allow others to tell about us as a part two. And then a third piece that I've put together on the purpose of suffering, because in all of the old stories, the characters are generally put through quite an ordeal. And there's purpose in that ordeal that allows them to succeed further down the line. And so, showcasing those three topics while telling one single story in three parts, like we've done here on the Iron John series, and have it be a little bit more directed. Still a little bit of open discussion, being that we're talking about feeding the story, but put together more class based versus discussion based. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to developing that and getting out there. I'll be contacting districts in the next month and a half here to basically meet their deadlines to have programming approved to then be launched for classes in the January through, I think they, depending on the district, they do 3 or 4 magazines a year. It's usually 3, fall semester, winter semester, and then summer break is their 3 blocks. And so once I get on a roll, I'll continue to offer community education classes through various different school districts. So that's something that is new inspiration pretty much as of between last session and this session.
Wow, it's inspiring me. I wonder if they have something like that here. I'm gonna have to look into it. I like that you're like we grow through challenge and adversity, that you're introducing that to kids. Is it gonna be all ranges? All K
I
through 12?
basically probably limited into the high school just because some of the story content can be a little bit more for mature audiences, and then in the adult classes as well. So I'll basically be putting in for both high school age and adult age for the courses.
Would they do adults too?
Yeah, yeah, they have a whole section that's just specifically for adult enrichment courses, is what they call them. So
Wow. So
yeah,
is this through the school board site, or how would you find it?
yeah. Basically, you just go on to pick a school district nearby, and then you basically look for their community education tab within all of their offerings. And
Hmm.
then once you go to the community education, somewhere within that segment, it's usually in their about section, there'll be teach a class uh, page, and they generally have the teach a class page is set up with a submission form where you can submit your class right online, and then they'll take a look at it. And generally, from what I can tell, most districts are looking for programming, and so long as it fits their requirements, uh, that it pretty much be a go, and you don't have to be like a degreed teacher or anything. If you're just somebody who has something that's passionate and you want to share, you can teach class, which is really cool.
Wow, well, I know what I'm doing tonight. This is
Research
over.
time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, should we get into part 3, the finale, the war?
Yes, we shall. The
And then you were
conclusion.
going to talk afterwards. You were going to expand on the feeding the story and add some material
Yes,
to that concept.
yes. And so I'll go into that once we come out of the story.
Okay.
And so as we go into the conclusion of Iron John, picking up with the upcoming war. And as I always like to do, I invite the ancestors of the story to come and bring the story into the room with us. I also invite my faith. For me, it's Jesus Christ to come and sit beside me. Invite listeners to also invite their faith and their ancestors to come and sit with them as we enter into the story of Iron John. And so it was that word had come to the king that a great enemy had amassed its forces and was marching upon the land. And so the king did what any good king would do and began to muster his forces to meet this enemy at the borders of the kingdom, to prevent this army from coming upon his citizens. And as he gathered together his forces, our young boy was not so young anymore, and thought of himself as being quite grown now. And he went unto the master at arms and asked if they might leave a horse behind for him, for he wished to also go and fight for the king. The master at arms chuckled and said, "Yes, yes. After we are gone, go to the stables. I'm sure there'll be at least a horse left for you." Well, once the army had gone, our boy did just that. And he found for himself, at the back of the stable, a very old mare who was lame. And as they walked, and he rode upon his tired old nag, going hippity-hop, hoppity-hip, on its 3 legs as it limped along. Well, our boy went not directly to the front lines, but he went to the dark, enchanted forest, where he called out for Iron John, calling his name twice as loudly as he could. "Iron John! Iron John!" And he was there quite speedily. "What is it that you want, my boy?" "I've come because I want to go to war." "Then you shall. Wait here." And Iron John went back into the forest and emerged with a stable boy behind, guiding a magnificent armored warhorse. And behind this warhorse came a band of iron-clad warriors, swords already drawn, gleaming in the sunlight. And as the boy mounted his warhorse, the 3-legged nag was given to the care of the stable boy, and our boy went off to war. On the front where the king was fighting desperately to keep his army together, it was close to a time when he would meet his end, for he knew his forces were vastly outnumbered and outskilled, and his men were fading. But just at that critical moment, our boy arrived, riding and charging down upon the enemy's flank with such fierce and force of skill. The enemy was disbanded and fled almost immediately, and the boy gave chase and ran them down to the very last man. And when he was finished, he did not return immediately to the king, but went instead a roundabout way back to the forest, where he exchanged his warhorse again for the 3-legged nag, and went hippity-hop, hoppity-hip, on back to town. Well, when the king arrived home, the princess greeted him and congratulated him upon his victory. But the king told her it was not he who had won the day, but rather a mysterious knight and his iron band had come to the rescue. She asked who this knight might be, and the king said that he did not know, for this warrior knight had ridden off chasing after the enemy, and that was the last he had seen of him. Well, the princess thought she might go to see the gardener and inquire after the gardener's boy. And when she spoke to the gardener laughed. "Ah, yes, he is only just now returning on his 3-legged nag. I saw him coming down the road. One of the farmhands, they called him Moopy Goop, and another teased him. 'Sitting underneath the lilac tree, were you?' And the boy responded, 'I fought quite well, and had I been there, who knows what might have happened?' And the gardener told the princess that he had just seen him going into the stables. Well, the princess went back and spoke with the king. And the king had had an idea that they would throw a festival, and that the princess would throw out 3 golden apples, one each day, over the course of a 3-day festival, and invited all of the knights of the land to come for this contest. And it was between the princess and the king that they hoped this night would appear. Well, as soon as the announcement came out, the boy went again to the woods and called for Iron John. And again, Iron John came. "What do you want this time?" "I want to catch the golden apple that the princess will throw." "Aye, consider it done, for you have nearly caught it and have it in your hand already." And Iron John brought forth beautiful, shining red armor and a powerful chestnut mare. And the boy donned the armor and rode to the first day of the festival. And he slid in amongst the knights, and no one recognized him. And when the princess threw the apple into the crowd, he caught it with ease and rode away immediately. The second day of the festival, he went again to the woods, and Iron John brought out a white horse and white armor. And the boy went again to the festival, sliding in amongst the knights. And he caught the apple again. And again he turned and rode away. And this angered the king greatly. For it was common practice, after catching the apple, to go and greet the king. And so he gave orders to his men that should the knight appear again and catch the apple and ride away without coming to see the king, he gave orders to his men to give chase, and, if need be, use a sword and give a wound. Well, the boy went again to Iron John, and this time he was given a black horse with black armor. And the boy came again into the crowds of the knights, and again he did catch the apple, and he turned and rode away. But the king's men, as ordered, gave chase, and they were swift and kept pace. And one of them managed, with great urging of his horse, to get close enough and stab the boy in his leg. But the boy's horse gave a powerful jerk forward, ripping the sword from the man's hands, and the helmet of the boy fell off, revealing his beautiful, shimmering golden hair. And all the king's men had seen it, and returned to the king and reported what had happened. Well, the next day, the princess went to the gardener's house, and there she spoke again with the gardener, inquiring as to where the boy would be. And the gardener said that he was not about at the moment, but that he had come home late last night from the festival and had shown his children 3 golden apples and allowed them to play with them. Well, the king's men were sent to find the boy and bring him into audience with the king. And the boy came walking in his black armor. He had put on his tarbouche, and as he came into the audience hall, the princess walked around behind him and pulled off the tarbouche, and all the king's court could see his beautiful, shining, shimmering, golden hair reflecting off of the walls. And the king asked the boy, "Are you the knight who caught the 3 apples, each day wearing a different color armor, and rode away without greeting me?" And the boy responded, "Yes, it was I. I have here in my pocket the 3 golden apples as proof, and if you need more, I can show you the wound that your king's men gave me. But what is more, I am also the knight who came to your aid in the war and drove the enemy from the field. And the king spoke. Clearly, I owe you a great debt. Tell me, what is it that you desire, and it shall be yours? And the boy only gave thought for a brief moment, for he already knew what he would ask for. And he said, I think perhaps you should give me your daughter's hand in marriage. And the princess laughed gleefully and joyfully and walked over to the boy, saying, I like him. He does not beat around the bush. And she said yes, she would marry him, and kissed him right there in front of everyone. And the wedding was indeed grand. And the boy's father and mother were also invited to the wedding, and they did come, and they were filled with great joy, for they did not think that they would ever see their boy again. And as the wedding celebration was carrying on with the feasting and the merriment after the ceremony, there came a moment when the doors burst open with a loud thunder, and the music stopped, and in strode a majestic baronial king with full attendance, and he walked up and bowed before the boy, and he said, I am Iron John. I am a great and powerful king, and you have freed me from an enchantment that once turned me into a wild man. And now all of the gold and silver I own shall be yours.
That was quite a generous reward. All the gold and silver that he owns.
Yes, indeed.
I'm curious. I'm interested in hearing more about the enchantment because he went from wild man to king like that, and I'm interested more in what the wild man's backstory is, especially with the wild man being part of the king energy, like seeing that connection or that transition. I'm going to put the email again in the chat if there's anybody out there that wants to come and help feed the story. And then Art, you were going to talk about some more about feeding the story.
Yes. One thing that's really come up for me since I've really started doing a lot of the storytelling and the feeding of the story that happens in the groups as I take people through the Hero's Journey curriculum is that as we sit there feeding the story and we're just sharing what's coming up for us, and the true authentic connections and communication that's happening in that setting is really forming a lot of very powerful relationships between all the members of the group. And as I've been watching this, and as I look at just how powerful the stories are that we tell ourselves and allow others to tell us about ourselves, and working with that concept, feeding the story for me becomes more than just sitting down and having a discussion after having heard a story. it's for me a mode of communication for all of life at any points in time in life. And so, as an example, I also call another mode of communication coffee shopping, a very intellectual type of conversation. In our world, we sit down, you and I, Jeff, we go to a coffee shop, we sit down for a cup of coffee, and we're engaged in an intellectual conversation, and we have opposing viewpoints on, well, some political topic, whatever it might be. And I'm sharing my view and you're sharing your view. And as the conversation evolves, it ends up being, well, no, I'm right, you're wrong. Well, no, I'm right, you're wrong. And there's this back and forth debate. And that style of conversation, people get in trouble with each other a lot. And we start invalidating each other's experiences. And so I call that the coffee shopping style. And at that point in time, a choice as to what kind of story I want to write about what's going to happen. I could get all super angry, pissed off, pick up my coffee, throw it in your face, storm out of there, making a great big scene. And that's the story that I take to other interactions with other people. And I tell this great story of how I told you off by throwing my cup of coffee in your face. And this grandstanding communication that we have throughout society, I see this happening on social media platforms all the time. People call them trolls. It's no different than throwing coffee in somebody's face in a coffee shop gone wrong. So the other choice that I could make is, instead of I'm right, you're wrong, I could listen to your story, your experience, your viewpoint. And if I take the perspective of that's your story, you're telling me your story, and then I share what comes up for me. And when the other person, you, would reciprocate back, and we're just sharing with each other what's coming up for each other, realizing that our beliefs are formed from our life experience, what we've been through. And no one individual's experience is going to be the right way or the wrong way. And when we honor each other's experiences, we can agree to disagree. We don't have to be of like mind all the time. And when we share what comes up for each other, there's no telling what kind of beautiful things either one of us might learn or walk away from. And so practicing feeding the story itself in this kind of format, where I tell a story, and then we all take turns sharing what came up and where the conversation goes. I mean, we've had already in our first two sessions amazing conversations, just bouncing off of, well, this came up for me, you share what came up for you, Paul shares what comes up for him, and the conversation leads to beautiful places, and we walk away with all kinds of food for thought. And so feeding the story becomes more than just an after story discussion. It becomes a very valuable interpersonal communication skill that we can take out into our daily life interactions, where we can truly start building very rich, authentic connections. And so that's my experience with feeding the story and how it can really be used to heal and foster relationships.
Hi, Paul. Welcome. Why do you think that's so hard for people to do? Is it a skill that you have to learn and practice? Like our natural mode is to just do the coffee shop style.
At this point, I think is really all as a cultural, a general cultural society, it's all we know. It's what we've seen modeled growing up. Feeding the story would have been something that happened in the older cultures, where we had elders telling stories to the adolescents, preparing them for their rites of initiation. Well, I've been thinking on that a lot. And the feeding of the story practice, there's so much more happening there. That is the teaching of the youth. That's the modeling of the youth, of sharing what came up for them in the story. the elders aren't teaching that this is the right symbolism of a story. It's an open discussion and everybody's sharing. And so that's modeled. And in the older cultures, the feeding of the story would have been practiced and taught, and it would have been natural to model that then in everyday conversations and interactions uh, throughout the daily survival of hunting and gathering and taking care of the village. And so as we've moved away from that style of living, as we've overpopulated the world and we are living in very close quarters and high numbers, elders have disappeared. The hero's journey has been hijacked by entertainment. We've been told we can't follow our purpose. That only happens in the movies. Go follow the collective dream. The elders aren't respected as a whole in our society, and we've lost the stories. Feeding the story doesn't happen anymore, so there's no modeling of it. Bringing back this practice of storytelling and feeding the story, I believe, is a very valuable way to start shifting that paradigm in our culture. And the more of all of us can intentionally decide to start employing a feeding the story style when we're interacting with people, especially when interacting in an environment where we don't agree with everybody in the room. Now, it's easy if we're all in the same chat room. That's the same, hey, we all hate this person chat room. It's easy to get along, but that's not true community. True community is opposing viewpoints bouncing off of each other. I love that description of community. Martin Shaw from England, a storyteller, put that out in one of his books, and I really love that. That community is not a group of people that are all like-minded. Community is people in opposition, bouncing off of each other, feeding each other, challenging each other to grow. That's the energy of community.
Yeah, I think it's Scott Peck that has the concept of the pseudo community, where people try to keep things conflict free and polite so everybody gets along, but that's actually a pseudo community, and it takes conflict, like moving through and working through conflict to reach true community. Paul,
Totally
welcome.
agree.
Hey, how's my audio?
Oh,
Good.
it's fine.
All right, fingers crossed.
What's on your mind? How's your day? It's morning there, right?
Well, nothing on my mind because that's not what we're talking about. We're not coffee shopping here.
Yeah, well, what came up for you? That's on you. That's what's on you. That's
There you
your
go.
mind.
Well, what came up for me is what came up for me.
Well, what's on your heart,
heart
or wherever
space.
it comes up from?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Just giving you a little twisting your tits a little bit on this lovely Saturday morning and your Friday evening. By the way, welcome to September, guys. I've already been in it for a little longer than you.
Indeed.
It's already September 2nd over here. Yeah, well, at first, Arthur, thanks for the conclusion of the story. It was masterfully told, and I got to hear Tarbouche again, so I'm cheerful for that. I mean, not often in everyday life do you hear the word Tarbouche, so I love that. And this chair has this very horrible design where my Achilles heel touches the adjustment of the rise and fall, and if I touch it the wrong way, I fall. Which I just did. All right, so I'm back. Well, I mean, Jeff, what you asked Arthur, I'm curious. I want to speak about, because what comes up for me is like, why is it not a skill that we're proficient at? The feeding of the story, if you will, or that's just one way of describing it. We're not listeners. It's just that simple. We're not listeners. Stephen Covey says it, and I believe it's in the chapter of Seek First to Understand and to be Understood, Habit 5. And he says, we don't listen to listen. We listen to reply. So we're only listening so much into what another person is saying, so that we're prepared to reply. And then another thing that comes up is, and I'm guilty of it. And then, and the thing is, it's like, the truth is, when were we ever taught listening? And the men's work calls it active listening, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in the MKP material. The habit 5 in the 7 habits of highly effective people, that chapter really does say some amazing things on the subject. Like he even.
Ooh, hope we don't lose you. But they always go out on the good parts.
Mm-hmm. I know he has troubles with some of the servers over there where they come in and out.
Well, hopefully we get him back.
I'm back.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, there you are.
Yeah, switched over servers. That he even challenges active listening. He says that's not what we're getting at here. Because active listening, I'm getting an unstable message on my internet, so let me know how I come in. Active listening is not what we're talking about. We're talking about actually listening so that you can be in that person's shoes.
Mm-hmm.
So you can feel yourself in that person's shoes. And that's some profound SHIT. I don't know if we go around cursing so blatantly. That's pretty profound for me, I feel. And so to bring feeding the story into it, it's like, once someone says, well, I'm curious what's coming up for you, I've given them a green light to just, I've immediately interrupted the fact that I can't argue with that, because it's what's coming out of your heart. I've framed it in a way, my paradigm is, I've framed it in a way, I'm hearing what's come out of your heart. And if it's in fact coming out of your heart, neither here nor there, because it's going to be a little challenging for people that come out of their heart. Like, not to bring up the what you said a moment ago, just to put spotlight on it only. You said, what's on your mind? Because that's notoriously how we are communicators. What's on the mind?
Yeah.
It's about what's on the heart and communicating that way. Hey, what's on your heart? What's coming up for you? And then once I'm actually saying that, then my listening has to be in line with it. I can't say what's on your heart and then be listening to you, waiting to reply, only waiting to reply. So I love it. I love it as a whole concept, as a whole idea. And yeah, it is a huge paradigm shift. And how do we get there? And just to touch on what Art said just quickly, yeah, it's how to resolve conflict effectively. And you know, men's groups attempt to teach that. I'm a living, breathing example of how piss poor of a job they can do at it if they're not properly prepared to resolve conflict. Because I lived through an example where conflict wasn't resolved properly, and I was thrown out as a result.
Whoa.
So yeah,
was
yeah.
this
And that's why I say
KP?
it was through MKP, Circle of Men.
Oh, I have the book.
And I never gave. Yeah, the book is phenomenal. The book is it's just a text, though, right? When you bring it into real life, it's a whole different world. You know, and I don't mean to throw any shade anywhere where it doesn't belong. I just know that I have a living, breathing example of how conflict wasn't resolved well, only because the people involved maybe weren't aware, or they weren't getting their simple and easy way to resolve things. Sometimes it takes, you know, I think I read it in the article I sent you, Art, from that other men's group, steel against steel, the sharpening, steel against steel. That's a conflict. And how are we taking it to the point of steel against steel means something good, not something that needs to be stopped, thrown away, you know, and unplugged, if you will. So, and the last thing, we're all hungry. What's what other thing came up with me? We're all hungry. So therefore we want, like right now, I know I'm giving a lot of words to what I'm saying. I'm getting spotlight. And I think we're all hungry for that. So if we're hungry for spotlight, how are we to give it to another person? And what that means is when I want to give you spotlight, I say, what's coming up for you? And then I give you spotlight. Like you're giving it to me right now, you and Arthur. And with that said, I want to give you both spotlight, give it back to you. And thank you for listening.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I get kicked out of groups all the time too for poor conflict resolution skills from the group, or I end up leaving groups. It's as often one as the other. So it's not always a reflection of you, or at least I don't internalize much from it.
Well, I'm grateful you're saying that, and that's what came up for you. You see, when I shared my experience, what came up for you is your experience, and and we could be relatable in that respect. So, but thank you for saying it for sure. And it's a matter of accepting what is. You know, that's something that's relatively another new paradigm for me. Is just accepting what is, meeting reality where reality is, not wanting reality to be something it's not. You know, that's a whole nother. We'll be here for another hour with that topic alone.
That's a podcast in and of
I
itself.
did a whole episode on conflict resolution, actually.
Yeah, I would imagine it was pretty insightful. And were there any conflicts during the conflict resolution?
It was just me. It was a solo episode, okay. So it was just me giving what comes up for me on conflict resolution and my past history and experience with it.
Cool. And if I might ask, what was, because you got the chance to have an audience, if you will, you believe there was an audience tuned in listening, so you felt you had a platform. And what was the key takeaway you got after talking about it in that episode? What'd you come up
I don't know that I got any feedback on it. It was just I've done a lot of
for yourself. For yourself, what you felt after you got it out, after you spoke about it. Some key takeaway must have been there, because we get the chance to speak. Even if it's into the virtual unknown,
into the void.
We get the chance to speak it out.
I don't remember, honestly, because I was doing an episode a day, speaking on different topics, and I don't remember what I got out of that one particular episode in relation to any of the others.
Cool.
Another thing that came up for me with what you said, though, is I call it cognitive empathy, being able to see yourself in other person's shoes. And then the emotional empathy is when I can emotionally relate to the experience. But you talked about speaking from the heart, and it requires a certain type of listening. But speaking from the heart is almost as difficult, or maybe even more difficult for me than listening to somebody else speak from the heart. I think I can receive when someone else is speaking from the heart, but I don't know that I can always access. I never know when I'm speaking from the heart or the head, and they're not really that separate for me anyway, but I do notice it as a listener in others, I think. But it's harder to detect the place I'm speaking from at any given time. So I imagine that being the case, it's got to be challenging for someone to adjust their listening.
Well, also just develop the skill of that type of listening. It is a specialized type of listening.
Yeah.
I was going to say, a guy once told me go ahead.
It takes people who can speak from the heart to develop it on, to learn it, to practice it on.
Yeah. Those would be our mentors. I'm not going to say our elders, because there are probably some elders out there that are capable, but for the most part, it's our mentors. And who are those mentors? I don't know. You know, Pema Chodron, I think I mentioned her. If I didn't mention her here, I mentioned her in our conversation with Art. Perhaps she's somebody who can be that way. You know, just seek out those people who are listeners from the heart. And it's not an everyday practice that we encounter. I think seldomly that we do, especially in this more polarized day and age. You know, where Arthur was describing that coffee shopping conversation. What I feel is it went from coffee shopping to full on aggressiveness, attacking. Because coffee shopping could be a wonderful endeavor. It could be beautiful, a debate, a conversation, a little bit of friction, steel on steel. But if I'm taking my cup and I'm splashing it in your face, no, it's gotten to the point where no, it's not. It's no longer a healthy exchange of coffee shopping. It's it's something worse, something bad, and that has come the case. This polarization. I'm a Republican, you're a Democrat. You know, and whatnot. So to get to the place of listening from the heart, it's almost like we're way over here, and listening from the heart's way over here, and now we've got to travel to over here. And I don't want to sound evangelic here, but it's certainly it's the rescuing of our humanity. That journey is necessary for the rescuing of our humanity, to listen from the heart, to be more heart listeners. And Feed the Story is a vehicle for getting us there. It really is. It's nice because what I like the design of it, and I'll give a little bit of spotlight to Arthur on this, he could speak to it. It gives us something to hold on to. We listen to a story, which is nice. We're storytellers at heart, so we're story listeners at heart. And then you're asked what came up for you. So you're guided to be a heart listener, to be a heart speaker after listening to the story. So it's a good vehicle, I feel, like we're about to do with the third part of Iron John.
What I love about it, and one of the big blocks to being able to speak authentically, it's true for me. I hear people talk about it and share that it's true for them. I mean, at the end of the day, I truly feel all of us are afraid to truly share that inner self, that heart space, because that's our true self experience. That's our higher self experience. And of being told we're wrong, of having that experience invalidated. If I am told I'm wrong for believing and feeling the way I believe and feel, then why do I want to share? That's a big roadblock there. Society, I joke about a no fault society. We live in it's not my fault. I didn't do it. I'm not wrong. There's so much spotlight on it's not my fault. I'm not wrong. And that's led to an inability to share because of that fear of being told I'm wrong. And when I'm invited to say what's come up for me, that this is a safe space we're in, we are just sharing what came up for us and putting it out there. And it's not about being told right or wrong, because you heard the story and what came up for you is what came up for you. We all had the exact same experience. So there's no arguing over, oh, but that's not what the storyteller said. Well, we all heard what the storyteller said, but we're all having different experiences in what came up for each of us in listening to that story. And it's in the heart of that moment right there.
Oh,
Struck me the most about feeding the story as a communication skill in daily life.
I think I'm freezing.
I'm hearing Arthur okay. This is some feedback.
Looks like you're back with us there, Jeff. So, but when I get invited to be able to say what comes up for me in a room with people who we all just shared the same experience, so it removes the argument of different experiences. Now we all had the same shared experience, and now we all get to see all the different things that came up for the people in the room from that one experience. That practiced awareness, when I carry that into the outside world and I see somebody sharing their experience, I can now look at that as their experience. I don't need to contest or argue whether or not they're having that experience, whether they're saying A, B, and C happened. It's not my job to say, no, A, B, and C didn't happen. It's really D and E over here. What are you talking about? Well, I just invalidated their experience. And now we're into the friction. We're into the argument. We're not having an authentic connection. But if I say, oh, you experienced A, B, and C, really tell me more about that. What comes up for you about, share what came up with you when you had that experience. And then I share what came up for me in hearing that experience and how that may or may not relate to me. Now, this is real communication we're happening here, because now there's no fear of being told, no, it's not A, B, and C, it's D and E. That's the heart of the fear and the friction, and where the true arguments and the trolling and all those negative reactions that come from interacting with each other, that if we can really break down that wall and remove that fear of being wrong and know that our experience will be validated, even if the person doesn't agree and has a different experience, that's okay. And that's the heart of what happens in feeding the story. And in this safe room, it's very easy to practice that, where it's not so easy to practice it out in mainstream daily life.
Mm. So what came up for you, Paul?
It's funny you asked that, because I was going to ask you that question, Jeff. What came up for you with what Arthur was sharing?
Well, as to the story, I was struck probably most by the king and his desire to have the boy greet him and after he caught each apple, to go up and thank the king and acknowledge him. I was struck by that. Like, why was that such a big deal? Is that ego? Is that vanity on the king's part? Why is it so important for the king? And the boy seemed very much to be doing his own thing throughout the story. He had his own vision of the way he was going to carry out his goals. He took his own path. The king wanted certain things to happen, and the boy did it his own way anyway. He didn't seem really concerned with what the social expectations around him were. That he had like intrinsic motivation, or he was driven by these internal values that he was operating off of. But for the king, when they conflicted with that, it was the king didn't know that part of the boy. He was just another subject in the kingdom. He was expected to follow the conventions and traditions of the kingdom. And for some reason, that was really important to the king. And so that part stood out at me. And I'm still curious about the wild man himself. Like, I don't know enough about him. I know the creature at the bottom of the pond, and then he mentored the boy, and suddenly he's this king that got lifted from the enchantment. But I'm really curious about his backstory. And so that's what struck me the most, is the king kind of being the enforcer of tradition and traditional expectations, and the boy kind of having his own path through the story.
One of the things that strikes me the most on that note, that I've thought a lot about with that, is, the boy is always wanting to hide his gold and doesn't need or want the gold that's being given him. When the princess tries to give her gold, which is the gold coins, he's like, oh yeah, no, gardener's boy's toys, I don't need that gold, I have mine. And he's keeping his hidden because he always wants to hide his golden hair. And he doesn't want that attention of, hey, I caught the apple, here's my golden apple, look at me, I caught the apple. He's not looking for that attention either. It's not until he's truly called into the audience of the king that he comes forward, and he doesn't fight having the princess take the tarbouche off. He doesn't try and stop her. He just stands there. She does it, he lets her, because now he's ready for it to be revealed. He's ready to share his gold. And to me, the golden symbolism throughout this story starts with the golden ball as the childhood purpose we hold and play with as our childhood toy. In the forest, that golden ball is transformed into the golden hair, which is a self-realization of the boy and his purpose, and it's time for him to leave the forest and go see what poverty is, make his way in the world. But he has his internal purpose. He's been able to carry his golden ball with him in the form of his golden hair, but he's not ready for that to be seen. That's clear to me in the story. The why of that, I think that's where that really comes up for an individual experience listening to the story. Why would I want to hide my inner gold? In my case, I have never felt as though I had true permission from the world around me to share my gold without that gold being attacked and set upon. Of, no, you can't, don't do that, that won't work out, minimize, play small, all these messages that come down from the world at large. So that's why I keep my gold close to my heart. The story doesn't tell us what's on the boy's mind and why he's doing it, but only that he does. And that's the beauty of some of these stories, I truly think, is that details of that nature are left out because it is meant to elicit my experience with that. I am supposed to insert my why into the story for myself while listening to it, because that's the catalyst that brings that up. It's what's pulling up. The lack of detail in a story is what gets us intellectually fixating on it. And in that intellectual fixation, now when we think about it, if we allow ourselves to go into our heart space and feel into, well, why is that missing, or why was that there, or why was that not explained, and then we put ourselves into the shoes of that story. Well, if it was me, it's like this. Okay, now I'm seeing something come up. And so these old stories were designed in that way intentionally, I believe, in the way that they're told and created for the purposes of eliciting things to come up and for being able to share and feed the story. And so that's what comes up for me with in relation to the gold of the story.
I found it curious that Jeff referred to the king in his ways of keeping order and requiring certain rituals and certain practices be upheld, and that's authority. We talked a little bit about that last week with the clash of authority, but certainly that's the king's energy, to keep order, to keep things intact, so that there is an orderly court, if you will. I refer to that as my sovereign's or my ruler's key strength, to maintain order within me in that energy. So yeah, I just thought that was interesting. Like, you're like, you king, keep an order, Jesus, that kind of thing. And the boy, is he defying authority? That's what came up. Like, that's a curious question. Is he defying authority, or is he just going his own way? And are they one and the same? He catches the apple, and does he know that there is a court ritual that you must? But in a sense, he's been doing it through the story, because clearly he knew not to unlock the cage. The king, his father, ordered that the cage be locked, and if it to be open upon death. And he went and he did it. And why? Why did he do it? So that he may rescue his golden ball. He wasn't releasing the wild man, he was rescuing his golden ball. Because that was the deal. Iron Man, Iron John, Wild Man, let me out. No, give the boy, give me my ball. Iron Man, let me out. Next day, give me my ball, let me out. Give me my ball, let me out. So the kid's got no choice. Well, fuck, I got to let this guy out so I can get my ball, and I got to defy authority to do it. Which is ultimately he took the key and he let him out, and then that was the beginning of here we go kind of thing. And he just kept doing it along the way. He obviously he was told not to touch the well water. Okay, if it was a well, I don't remember if it was a pond, and he did.
Spring.
Not in an enormous defiance. This wild man says, "Don't touch the water." Well, watch what I can do. Kind of like what comes to mind is Mickey Mouse with the sorcerer. The sorcerer said, "Hey, don't fool around with this cap." And what does he do? And then I'm sure you've both seen that. I think it's from Fantasia, if I'm not mistaken.
The Sorcerer's Apprentice.
The Sorcerer's Apprentice, yeah. The enormous, pardon my French, the shit show that occurs. That then he has to take responsibility for at the end. But certainly that was him. Like again, maybe he was just innocently exploring and it just got out of control. So the boy is just curious, innocently, his finger hurts, boom, let me dip it in the water, see what happens. Just curious versus being a defiant person. But then the flowers as well. The gardener says, hey, give her the most beautiful flowers. Nah, these are more fragrant. I'm going to do this. So it is a matter of saying, be true to your purpose. And he was being humble about his journey. He wasn't going around flashing his hair to everyone. Hey, look at my awesome golden hair. No, he's being very discreet about it. And then what just comes up right now is the gold coins or the gold apples. It's still a symbol of gold, which is a symbol of purpose. Because that's what the story is always saying. Gold is purpose. And he's saying, well, this is not my gold. So this is not my purpose. So there's no need for it. And he considers it, actually, I said this last week, he always took the gold and gave it to the kids because to him, he was playing with his golden ball as a kid. And that was important to him. So he thinks maybe these gold pieces will be important to these kids. And he passes it on. And the last thing I'll say is what I found just interesting right now, what Art was talking, the pond water created gold. Because when his hair fell in the water, that's how it turned to gold. So water is such a very important element, it seems. I mean, to bring up Siddhartha, there's a lot of reference to the river that Siddhartha listens to. I'm reading The Alchemist. He's in the desert, but the desert was once water. So water being an element that's important came up while Arthur was sharing a little bit there. Yeah, that's what came up.
I think it's because the boy is a king himself. Like a king's not going to be ruled by another king, and it's very hard for a king to attempt to rule a fellow king. I associate gold with king too, and it's not so much my. I wouldn't really call it an objection, but my reaction was not to the king maintaining order, which I have no problem with. But I didn't understand why having to go and talk to the king after the apple was any kind of threat to order. It seemed like an arbitrary preference on the king's part, not more that it had anything to do with maintaining any kind of order. I don't think order was threatened by the boy not just catching the apple and not going up to the king.
But if I can interject, he got to the point where he says, hey, wound the guy if he tries to get away the third time. Hurt the guy. Because this is it. That's it. I'm fucking fed up. 3 times already? 2 times he's already defied me. The third time, you hurt him if he tries to get away. So he is being, in that respect, he's gotten to the point of being tyrannical almost, like in a mild level, but he's asking his soldiers to wound the unknown figure, if you will, to detain him to restrain his agency, restrain his freedom. So, but no, what I'm saying is what you're questioning is why king?
Yeah.
Why should I have to come and bow before you with this apple? Why is it not okay for me to just dip out? I caught the bloody apple. That was the goal. And now I'm ready to, I'm out of here. So there is a bit of a defiance going on. I don't know, we have to answer for ourselves why the boy chose that.
It's only defiance if he knew about the king. I didn't get the a clear idea from the story, the clear indication that the boy even knew what the king's expectations were.
Perhaps, as I said a moment ago, like he maybe he was unaware of the court orders, but then again, why is he fleeing? He basically decides to flee the scene. So there's something happening for why the boy is doing that. And the writer intended, of course, for us to feel into that. Because he's been successful. Out of all the knights that are there, he's caught that apple. It's kind of like what comes to mind is at the wedding ceremony when the woman catches the bouquet. It's like, wow, she's not running out of the room and disappearing with the bouquet. No, she's part of a celebration of you're the next one to get married kind of thing. So here's the boy saying, yeah, I don't want that fanfare. I don't want that attention. I'm out of here. So it's curious of a thought. And very much like you're curious about the Iron Man's story as to how he came to be enchanted with the iron skin. And then becoming an exile in the forest. This is stately king. He did something. Just like the beast, the prince did something to become the beast. He defied the old woman's need for shelter. And she placed an enchantment on him and his castle. So the king, who then became Iron John, had to have done something. And what I read in a few of the Iron John stories, even the original versions, it's the helping of the story. The Iron John character helped the boy, and the boy was pure of heart. And that's what broke the enchantment. He helped somebody who was pure of heart and expected nothing in return as well, I believe. So yeah, so how he came to become enchanted, you could probably write that story, Jeff.
Is it out there? Or do they have the
I don't know. I think Arthur knows that he's read the stories, so even Robert Bly's version. We don't know why the Iron John is enchanted, right?
No, the story itself never
we need the
tells us about
prequel?
it. And yeah,
Yeah, origin story.
I don't know of an origin story. But going back to our part one conversation, what really resonates to me is the wild man and the king are part of the sovereign archetype. The archetype gets differentiated: king, sovereign, same thing. But I really like wording it and framing it in sovereign as the archetype, the king civilized in the castle is one side of it, the deep primal wild man energy is the other side of it. And if Iron John is enchanted, as the story does say, I was enchanted. And he doesn't say somebody cursed me. It's I fell under an enchantment. I became enchanted. When wild man energy and king energy are out of balance. And I've seen a lot of people, drug addiction. I'll pick on drug addiction, alcoholism, addiction of any kind. I truly feel is a really good example of primal wild man energy, unfettered, unconscious, out of control. That's an enchantment. If I am completely taken over by my addiction, I am completely out of balance and enchanted and stuck in wild man energy, gone way too far. And in the story, it's through the helping and through essentially becoming a mentor to the boy. And in helping and mentoring the boy, from the time the wild man is let out of the cage, his first thing is the cage doors open, he's running. He's gone. He doesn't even look back or think about it, the boy. He stops because the boy calls out to him, "Wait, where are you going? Don't leave me. They'll beat me." He stops out of compassion because the boy says he'll be beaten, and the wild man offers to bring him. This begins the first step back away from that wild man energy out of control, and every interaction with Iron John, who becomes a little bit less wild in the way he's interacting with the boy, until at last, when the boy has achieved his purpose and the need for mentorship has come to its natural close and evolution, now he's freed to be his sovereign self again, his kingly self again. And now he's back in balance. And so that's what comes up for me as far as when we're talking about the enchantment. It's a self-enchantment. And that came up in our conversation in part 2. We were talking about enchantments near the end. That for me, the greatest orchestrator of my own enchantments is myself, of being out of balance with myself and my purpose. If I'm out running around addicted to drugs, I can blame it on a lot of other people of getting, whatever bad rap, or don't have any choice, or, I just want to escape because everything sucks so bad. I'm still making those choices. It's not somebody else who's cursed me. Now, there's cases of trauma and true abuse, and that forms its own kind of trauma enchantment, which I think is more of our modern day curses. But still, when it comes down to choice and orchestrating my own story, how do I want to write my story? Do I want to become trapped in that trauma? Do I want to allow that trauma to continue to affect me? Or do I want to start making choices to step beyond the trauma, to heal the trauma? It still comes down to the choices I make for myself and whether or not I can break enchantments that I have. And so that's what I really get out of the wild man and the king kind of polar positions through the story, and the breaking of the enchantment by the end of the story. That's what comes up for me.
I don't think I can add anything to that.
I sure as hell can. What I was doing, which is true to what I love to do, which is how Arthur and I became more intimate with the word suffering, is I just looked up the definition of it. And we came to learn of an archaic definition of suffering, which was, it just exploded the idea and also took away the perversion of the word suffering as we know it today, because the word has been deeply perverted. It's become something we avoid, something we run from, something we don't want in our lives. And it's none of that. But so enchantment, feeling of being attracted, great pleasure, delight, and under a magic spell. So enchant, just the word enchant as a verb, is to fill someone with great delight. As an action, as a, actually it's always as a verb, put someone or something under a spell, bewitch them. So there's two things that go on with enchantment and enchant. But like even Arthur's drug addiction or alcohol addiction, feeling of being attracted, great pleasure, delight. Of course, there are things that are killing us, these addictive things, whether they're substance or whether they're otherwise. I mean, being an addicted shopper, obviously it's not a physical substance, but it certainly is damaging to one's personal finances. However, there's great delight in buying, having this new shiny thing. Even in the first definition, when I typed enchantment, it talks about, I think, something shiny, a quality that attracts and holds your attention by being interesting, pretty. Pretty in the sense of physical beauty, but pretty in the sense of material beauty. So, and I love what you just said, Arthur, about the trauma as an enchantment. It's possible to be attracted to something that's painful. And that is trauma as an enchantment, which is again, another podcast, right? But the out of balance of the king and wild man, like the king is an orderly energy, the wild man is a primal energy. Okay, the king energy keeps order, keeps things orderly, let's just say. The wild man brings out what's primal. Both are important. Like if king goes to war, he needs wild man, because he's going to be. I mean, what comes to mind is Mel Gibson in why is his fucking name escaping me? Braveheart. Yeah, or any. I mean, Russell Crowe in Gladiator. Right? These are men who are calling upon their wild man energy because it's needed. But I feel that within each energy, there's, and I've just last night in my OPP call, looked at it as consciousness of the energy and unconsciousness of the energy. And Arthur's just said about being unconscious of your kingly energy is when you're in wild man. And I have to differ in thought, because it's possible to be conscious in wild man energy, and then it's beneficial. To be unconscious in wild man energy is to be hurtful, harmful, tyrannical. In king energy, to be conscious, to be orderly, to be stately, to be fair. Unconscious in king energy is to be tyrannical, is to be vicious, is to use one's power to control and manipulate, to gain one's own benefit. And there are countless examples of that in film. Kings who are just very selfish. And I mean, I don't know, Napoleon Bonaparte, was he a selfish king? Was he a tyrannical king? I mean, there's a film coming out about him, so we'll find out. Joaquin Phoenix is playing the role. Yeah, so I feel there's king and there's wild man, and they are in one. And that's what this story teaches us. And that's what Arthur's awesome to bring it this way, because as he's stated, the Mankind Project, or the men's work, they split them. They call the wild man a separate archetype. And it's like, it's just another facet of that sovereign. That's all it is. And it's important to call upon that wild man at times. But then again, are we calling upon it in an unconscious and immature awareness of the powerful energy that it possesses? The wild man, the king, the lover, every one of the archetypes. Because that's what came up last night in my call. It's like we're talking to caregiver, we're talking to healer, caregiver. And the mentor was attempting to say some things. And I'm like, no, it's not that. That's not the way it is. And it was pretty profound. It was saying me, because it was my part talking, my archetype talking about me. I'm unconscious, or not completely conscious, of caregiver's energy. I'm in a state of flux between conscious and unconscious about my caregiver's energy. But the more conscious I can become about my caregiver's energy, the more powerful I'll be as a caregiver. So
Is
it's
OP
pretty,
a mega point?
yeah, mega point, exactly, OPP. But actually, it was funny because in the mentor, I said, I like that we're doing this, but the mentor kept saying, well, I want to warn you that the OPP curriculum doesn't match with what you're talking about. All right. It doesn't, the OPP will say that the caregiver is wounded and the caregiver needs to be healed. And the OPP will say that parts quarrel, that there's fights between parts. And I'm sitting here saying, no, that's not the case. There's a fight within Paul's awareness of his consciousness of the parts. There's wounding with Paul's consciousness with the parts, but the parts are intact. They are energetic, their energy, and their energy is always solid. It's just consciousness or unconsciousness about the energy.
So you're talking about your consciousness of your own caregiver energy.
Exactly. Or my lack of consciousness, my low level consciousness. And that's, Pearson will talk about it. There's the levels. There's shadow level. There's level 1, level 2, level 3. Yeah. As I ascend in those levels, my consciousness is increasing. If I'm in shadow with that archetype, that energy of that archetype, then obviously I'm in a low level of consciousness and in maturity with that energy. Yeah. So pretty powerful, pretty powerful. I'm excited to go forward. And my mentor's open. You know, he's like, yeah, let's fuck it. You know, let's play loose. So exciting things with that. But yeah, back to Wild Man and King. It's like, it's cool that Iron John and that we're able to do that in discussion, to do this in discussion where we become aware that they're one and the same. And we're shown that because obviously Iron John becomes a king again at the end of the story. You know, and Jeff, you said the boy is a king. He is a king. We're all kings because it's part of our energy.
Yeah, but I don't know if we're all going to develop as kings, like to level 5.
We'll be unconscious.
Like you're not going to have a society of all kings.
But no, it's not even a matter of society of all kings. It's a matter of each individual possessing the most conscious energy of that king within them.
Yeah, I think that's the ideal, but I don't think everyone's going to.
Oh, no, because it's a tall order. Some people just want to fucking zone out and watch TikTok. Okay, so no, they don't want to get present. They don't want to come to conversations like this, Jeff, to develop enlightenment, develop awareness, develop consciousness. I mean, we're here for roughly an hour and a half now, and we could go for another hour and a half. At least I feel we could, you know, and I think all three of us would relish at that because we have the appetite for it. Mm-hmm. Others don't. Again, they want to zone out. They want to binge watch the latest show. Who knows? And not to judge that. However, I do feel it's a discredit to the beauty of life to make that the only thing. Because actually, again, it refers to Siddhartha. He talks about samsara, and samsara is the world of images, our earthly world. Okay, a distraction, if you will. And he says it's something to go to once or twice, but not to exist in. So when we're only existing in what's this earthly plane, this world that we're in, we're not choosing to go higher than it, then we're in samsara, and that's fine. It's fine for the people who want to be there. Like when we have conversations like we have, where maybe Arthur and I use the word initiate, but it's a newbie, and they at least they stepped up to the plate. Did I break up or do you break up, Jeff? Arthur, you hearing me?
Yeah, I'm hearing you. Okay, Jeff's a little broken. Jeff appears to be frozen on us at the moment.
Yeah, I do see his image frozen. But good, I don't know. I've been sharing a lot. He said I froze. Okay, he's back.
Yeah, I froze. I didn't catch like the last 30 seconds.
I'll pass the baton. I don't know if there was much more I said.
It was about staying in the image, the samsara, the images, and not going higher.
Yeah, and choosing to stay only thinking that this earthly plane, Arthur calls it the 3D world, I think. But this earthly material plane, choosing to stay only here. And that's materialism, that's consumerism, that's the creature comforts of life, not choosing to relinquish those, even for a little bit. You know, I mean, I once had this summer, I asked myself, why do I live without air conditioning during the summer? You know, and the answer came back to me was because I choose to. Simple as that. It saves me money on electricity, which are the resource of electricity is cheap over here. It's not an expensive resource. It could become expensive, I guess, if you burned your AC 24/7. But it's me giving up that element of this physical realm, air conditioning. It's me giving it up and choosing not to rely too heavily on comfort. Because be uncomfortable, feel discomfort. And that's also in the Siddhartha story, he becomes a samana, which a samana is someone who gives up all comforts. He mentions that when he sleeps in the ferryman's hut, it was the first time he had a roof over his head in 3 years, because they always slept in the forest. Like, imagine not having a roof over your head for 3 years. Okay, we could think of homeless people. And like the homeless people are given a blight to society when in fact there's maybe just so much magnificence. And I don't know if all of them will see that magnificence, but they're living a life that's free from all of this distraction, this worldly pleasure, this comfort. I don't know. If I decide to willingly go become homeless, I'll send you a message somehow and let you know how it's going.
I don't mind the freedom.
But
That has an appeal. It's the shower and the hygiene that's my only issue.
I throw that shit out the window, man. I throw it out the window fast.
I can do that. I have to have my shower.
Yeah, which is curious. Let me ask you this: have you tried the whole Wim Hof cold showers thing?
No. I can't.
Yeah, see, right.
Not cold. Cold. That is. I can't do cold.
I did it once. Not my cup of tea. Not too cold a shower. No, I mean it. Yeah, it zings you up if you want to get zinged up. But
before
I have friends
we
that
had apparatuses to heat water, what did our ancestors do? Showered in.
Yeah.
What's that, Arthur?
Yeah, lakes, rivers, cold water. It would have been cold water bathing.
Yeah. Whatever the natural temperature of the water was.
Yeah.
So one of my arguments is the technology of shoes. Like, what did our ancestors do before we had shoes? We walked around barefoot, or we strapped a leaf to our foot. You know, and then how damaging is the technology of shoes? When we really get down to it, it removes our feet from the ground. So now we're no longer connecting with the earth. You know, look at the toilet. We're no longer squatting to release our bowels. We're actually sitting, and that damages the body's natural ability to do what it's supposed to do. That's why, like in Africa or here, it's very popular to have squat pots. I'm seeing a changeover a lot, but squat pot, like you squat when you use the toilet, like you would in the bush, like the African, where our origin, basically the origin of our species supposedly is, I don't know for sure, but to squat when we release versus sitting on a pedestal. You know, it actually changes the intestinal positioning. So, you know, we look at these technologies, we welcome them in, but as a matter of fact, they're damaging in a way. There's a little chair you can buy.
The squatty
rest
potty
at the base of your toilet. Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have one. I got it for free off this lady who was leaving Beijing. And I was so just overjoyed because I was about to build one. So as to put our body in the positioning that it was in when our ancestors did it, you know. So anyway, now I'm just completely on a tangent here and diverging away. But as far as comfort, as far as discomfort, as far as getting out of samsara and removing ourselves from all these comforts. So anyway, that was where I was going with that. Be a wild man, right? You know, let that beard grow out, let the hair grow out. Just be like Jay.
Well, I guess I'm spoiled
because, you know,
I need my shower, I need my shoes, I need my commode. So
You think you need them, Jeff. You think you need them, man.
I've gone without enough to know. So I guess yes, I want the wild man, but on my terms.
And no one's saying you can't have it on your terms, right? They're your terms. Just I just wonder what level of what level of engagement you'll have being selective about how you welcome your wild man. Kind
Because
of
the
thing.
wild man is internal. Anyway, it's not external. It's not.
Oh no, yeah, well, it's all internal. All of these archetypes are internal. And we all have them. That's what Pearson says, and that's what I think it said long before Pearson. We all have these different aspects of ourselves. It's getting to know them and then being conscious of how powerful they are. But I want to read you a quote from Seneca, which I've been referring to a couple of times, and I do a little bit of work with the Stoics, with
From
another
who?
group I'm in. From the Stoics, Stoic philosophy, Seneca.
Oh yeah, okay.
Until we have begun to go without them, we fail to realize how unnecessary many things are. We've been using them not because we needed them, but because we had them. Hot showers, perfect example.
What comes up for me in listening to you guys talk is really brings me back to the idea of, the power of story, of the story we craft for ourselves, the story we tell ourselves. What do we want for ourselves? And in those choices, I may choose, I want my comforts, or there's a lot of things I can live without. I mean, I'm largely spent the last year living in the middle of the wilderness in an RV that a lot of its internal guts don't function. So it's really just a hard top tent. And I'm going without running water. I've got a solar shower that's a bag with a nozzle that gives me my running water effect, but I got to fill it. Uh, you know, Little things like that. I cook on a propane stove, so I still have a stove, or I build a fire, I cook on a fire. You know, Choices I've made for myself, that it's the story I'm crafting. It's, do I need it? Do I want it? Those are parameters and definitions I'm deciding for myself. And it's the story that I'm crafting for myself and the individual experience. And it comes back to that idea of sharing our experiences. What I need and want for myself is what I need and want for myself, and sharing that experience. Paul likes to be very much a minimalist in a lot of different ways. He's choosing not to turn on his air conditioning. I'm choosing to live in an RV that doesn't have air conditioning, so I don't have that luxury. But there's still an element of my choice of, I've chosen to live in that kind of an environment. But it's not as active a choice as Paul's, where he has it, and at the flip of a switch, if he wanted to, he could turn it on. And so these realities, we have still each of us crafted for ourselves. And I firmly believe we do have the ability to largely shape our own story of our own world and our own reality around us, through our choices and our decisions we make. I might not be able to flip a switch and immediately get air conditioning right where I'm at, but still through choice, if I choose to no longer be in the RV and to be back in my house in Minnesota where there's air conditioning, then I would have that choice for that. And so it becomes very easy for my mind to be tricked into the idea of, I have no choice, or I can't, or the world won't let me. Perhaps not right here in this moment. Those factors might be true, but I can still start making choices to change and shape that environment and make different choices to get to where I want to be. And that, when we decide to walk our purpose, and to travel the path of the hero's journey. The hero's journey really does bring us down a road of that awareness of being able to craft our own story, to write our own road that we want to travel, and not be told that we can't, or that the road is too hard, or that it doesn't exist, because we can write our own stories.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree. There's limitations and parameters that are out of our control, but within whatever's in our control, we can. And I mean, if we're kings, we have the choice to have hot showers and toilets and whatever else.
I like to think of it this way: each of us is a king, and we have the ability to create our own little kingdom around us, whatever that is. And suburbia is a great example. We are kings of our own castles and our own 1 acre, half acre, quarter acre, whatever acre parcel. That's our kingdom. That's our house. We rule there with whoever else we've chosen to partner with. We each have a piece of a power of creation to create and build our world around us. But we are each kings and creators colliding with each other. And so when my story collides with your story, does it meld? Does it blend? Does it partner? Does it co-create? Does it build and evolve together? Or does it create friction? Does the collision destroy one and another carry on? I mean, if two people collide and somebody kills somebody, okay, the person that died, they had very little control over the outcome. They lost in the collision of what happened there. But if we track the story back somewhere along the road leading to that collision, there were choices that perhaps could have dictated another outcome. And so at the end of the day, we are all kings with the ability to build and rule our own kingdoms. But there is that factor of our stories colliding with each other. And the more there's an I'm right, you're wrong, and a lack of the ability to feed the story, the more friction and damage happens when kings collide. And the harder it is for us to be able to feel as though we have control of our own stories or the ability to build our own worlds, versus if we have that ability to feed the story, to honor each other's experiences, instead of us colliding and pounding into each other and there's damage in that collision, we can see each other coming. We could share our experiences and decide if we want to travel together and maybe not have that force of collision together. And that's part of what I believe comes with that, the ability to craft and build our own story and to share our experiences in a way where we can thrive instead of tearing each other down, like I see so much of in the world at large.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think even in that moment, we can decide what happens when our stories, they don't even have to collide, when our stories intersect. Depending on our level of insight and development and ability, we have some control or choice over how those stories intersect. Paul, anything you want to wrap up with?
Yeah, the Arthur and I talked once before about story in collision, story in harmony. You know, we each have our own story, and again, that goes back to, I was attempting to find a Martin Luther King quote that I recently used and came upon. How, you know, we fear each other. And let me see if it'll come up. Yeah, actually, this is even a better one. So he says, I am convinced that men hate each other because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. And they don't know each other because they don't communicate with each other. And they don't communicate with each other because they are separated from each other. So fucking amazing. What a quote. That's like that's a bigger quote than I originally found. Like the one I found was a nice pictured quote. This one was on the screen there, being in text. And so again, communication.
Communication's
And
hard.
also, and knowing that we're, that quote from Pema Chodron, we're in kinship. We are kin, all of us. And that's hard. That's the hard. You say communication's hard. How about the hard part of saying, that murderer and I are the same. We're in kinship. That thief, that Wall Street, slimy Wall Street guy who bilked everybody. I don't say if it's, what's his name, Bernie Madoff, but even, I am the same as Bernie Madoff. It's easy to say that slime bag, that asshole. I would never do that. But my challenge was to people. Actually, you know what? Even better. I mean, I know I'm on a few tangents. Will Smith slapping Chris Rock. What an asshole. Whatever. Blah, blah, blah. I could do it. If pushed to those limits, I could do it. You could do it. Arthur could do it. If pushed far enough, it all boils down to. But we're all kin. We're all kinship. So it is a matter of getting to that awareness that each of us has a story, and allow that story to be its own thing, versus your story needs to match my story for us to get along. And if it doesn't, if I'm strong enough, I'm gonna push you. I'm gonna force you to make your story my story, so that then I feel comfortable and safe with you. And Arthur said, the story we craft for ourselves. And then my phone died. I'm using my phone's data in order to have this call. The Wi-Fi in the house is dead. My phone's battery. So that's how I was gone for a while there. The story that is crafted for us, which Arthur, you usually say them in tandem. You say the story that we craft for ourselves and the story that's crafted for us. The story that's crafted for us is chase that hot shower. Okay, just to use hot showers as a nice metaphor.
Oh no, I craft that for myself.
No, I understand, but that's like a metaphor. It's like basically the hot shower is symbolic of all other things. Arthur and I were joking today. Everyone on this Facebook group, this Tony Robbins Facebook group, and always about the 6-figure income, financial freedom. And I'm like, that's the hot shower, you see?
Oh yeah.
Everyone's, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, you want the fucking 6-figure income? Why? Oh, well, I could send my child to college. So what if the child didn't go to college? So what? You think that's going to guarantee them a better future, right? Well, you don't know. So it's just kind of, again, just the hot shower is a good metaphor. But the story that is crafted for us, stay with the story that we craft for ourselves. The gardener saying, bring her the most beautiful flowers. The boy says, nah. The story that I'm living is I bring her the fragrant flowers, the wildflowers. The story that I'm living, the story my story is I catch the apple and I run off. I don't kowtow to king.
That's because he had a highly developed sense of his own personal values.
Why? I mean, you interpret that, and that's great. But how come him and not you and not Arthur and not me? How come?
I don't know.
What makes him so unique? That's 10 fingers and 10 toes, right?
Yeah, one of the theories is that it's innate in some people over others, or it's temperamented. The other thing is it can be developed, and sometimes through crises or life experience, it does get developed. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's a default for everyone at the same time.
Not a default, no. And yeah, circumstances, they do play a huge role. However, those circumstances will be how we The saying is, if you tell me you're suffering, I'll tell you your purpose. And what sufferings have you endured? What traumas have you endured? And in those sufferings and those traumas is your purpose. So those circumstances, they weren't defects. They were actually gifts. And that speaks to hero's journey perfectly. Because it's all, and then the Stoics come to mind, the amor fati. Amor, love, fati, fate. Love your fate. It's all for my benefit. That's a big nut to crack, Jeff. If you want to talk about tough shit, saying all of it's for my, tomorrow I find out I got cancer. I'm supposed to love that. Yeah, that's the work to be done. To love it. To believe that it's for my benefit. I was thinking of Steve Jobs the other day. Like he didn't take treatments for his condition and he died. He didn't want treatments for his condition and he died because that's what he wanted. So it just was profound for me when I was thinking of him, because I wonder what I would do if I were found to have some type of illness that required treatments and I chose not to have them. I chose to live through the pain. That's part of my experience, not find modern technology and drugs to attempt to change that fate.
I think about that
Fascinating
too.
Fascinating stuff. Yeah.
I would definitely be the thing you said about trauma being our purpose. I would definitely be interested in talking more about that at some point.
Yeah. We could play loose with us with a podcast episode, but we'd have to be playing loose because, it would just be from personal experiences. There's other one about purpose. It was like this Brazilian shaman or Peruvian shaman. I told Arthur about it. The two questions that you're asked is, what is your most profound emotional frustration? That's one. Like, what is the thing that's the most profound and emotional frustration for you? And two, notice how you go out in the world and alleviate it for others. Like, notice ways that you actually go out in the world and alleviate that emotional frustration for others. And that will actually reveal to you your purpose. And mine was connection, not feeling connected to people. But then I would go out in the world and alleviate connection for people, and I would find myself less connected because I'm such an oddball or an outlier. I'm a guy who harvests his gray water to flush his toilet, uses solar lights to keep his lights on. Yet the night before last, I was at an event. Everyone's socializing, chit-chatting, whatever. I'm using my finger to scoop out the hummus from these plastic cups because they gave celery, carrot, and cucumber that you could scoop it with. But when those vegetables were done, you had a plethora of hummus at the bottom of the cup. They were all over the place. People were leaving them behind because they, and to one woman I said, use your finger. And she sort of maybe wanted to, but then she didn't because I saw both of her and her boyfriend's cups on the bar. I took them, I ate them, and then I took 4 of them and I spooned them into this container I had and took them home and brought them to Esther. Nobody else was fucking doing that. And I'll put the icing on the cake. I just got it in my head that I wanted to do some karmic yoga. So I went around the whole venue and I collected up all the drinks. I brought them to one corner of the bar so that the bartender had less of a chore at the end of the night. And, I obviously looked like a weirdo going around picking up drinks and cleaning the place up. I mean, I'm a guest, but that was my karmic yoga exercise. So I wind up being this bloody outlier. The person that someone said, wow, that's great of you. But they chose not to go that path. And that's fine. But then I find myself in an island of a place versus being, so I'll go out in the world and create connection, but people are unable to relate to it. So that's where I'm having trouble with those two questions, Jeff. Like, what's my greatest emotional frustration and how am I going in the world to alleviate it for others? So, but yeah, it is a good topic, the suffering and the traumas that are what lead us to our purpose, to our goal.
We, as one outlier to another, we should definitely talk. one day.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, we're going to have a lot to talk about. I just before the podcast started, I sent you the images for your results of your survey.
Yeah, I got them. I was looking at them.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look at them more closely after this.
Yeah. Look them
I'm
over.
not sure how to interpret them yet, but I'll figure it out.
Well, Carol Pearson's book. Like I sent you the screen image of the Carol
Pearson.
I
found some of her stuff online. I was reading through it last week.
Yeah, but you got the book though from PDF Drive, I'm guessing, because that's where you can find the actual.
Got several PDFs, and she has a website too.
Okay, well, she has the book that relates to these 12 archetypes, the heroes within, the hero's journey, or something like that. But the screen image I sent you was from the section called "How to Use This Book." It's Awakening the Heroes Within. That's the name of the book. And it tells you what each part of the book will do for you and in relationship to your journey.
Is the higher score the better? Like the higher your score, the more awareness.
Well, it's interesting you say that, that number will shift and change. Right now, those numbers are high, so you're more active in those archetypes. Yes.
Okay. Because in Omega Point, they had like the five scale. You have to rate your archetype. So
there were levels or something like that, like how aware you were of that.
Yeah. So those numbers are similar to that scale.
No, that just tells you how active you are in that archetype. And then now with that OPP scale, you can say, okay, I have a high lover archetype. However, I'm in shadow. So you have a high lover archetype, but you're in shadow with it. So when you go out in the world, you go out in the world with your shadow energy of your lover archetype, and you do it often.
So what you sent me just now just shows how active the archetype is, but it's not necessarily how aware I am of it.
Right. No. What level you're at, what level of consciousness, if you will, with that archetype. Just saying that's
so it is my level of awareness with that archetype.
No. That's just how much you're in that archetype. In other words, that part of you shows up more in your life. But what level you're at, what level of consciousness you're at, that was the OPP survey. And,
so that's separate from whatever the number on this sheet is.
Yeah, that's separate from it. And then once you determine that, you say, okay, well, I'm in shadow with my lover. And I go into the world every day using my lover archetype mostly, as that number shows you, because lover was one of your higher ones, I think. And I need to do something. I need to do something about that to change.
Because I have my OPP ratings too, so I can go back and compare them and see which ones.
Yeah, you can. You certainly can. Actually, I mean, your highest one was Jester, which I've endearingly.
That sounds more accurate. Yes.
Yeah, you were 27, and these are
a lot of trickster energy.
Yeah,
and sometimes dark trickster.
Right, and that's actually because what the Jester is living in the moment. That's the Jester energy. So, but yeah, explore it, and like you just said a moment ago, I would thoroughly enjoy some conversations about what you find with that, and dipping into the book, because the book really does a nice. I haven't dipped all the way into the book, but it gives nice frameworks for what you're seeing there in the screen images that I sent you.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's all I got for now. And it's once again a wonderful call for sure.
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm ready for more of them. I'm sorry it's ending tonight. We could certainly keep it going. Well, we have our Tuesday thing too.
Yep. Well, we can pick another story and do another series in the future here. So
yeah, and we're going to be meeting in that group, Jeff. I think I'm joining that group.
You are gonna join?
Yeah, I'll be there on my Wednesday mornings, your Tuesday evenings. I think that's what it is, right, Arthur?
Yep.
Yeah. And actually, I just sent Arthur a link for a book. The author of Siddhartha has a book of fairy tales.
Hermann Hesse?
And I was like, wow. Yeah, Hermann Hesse has a book of fairy tales. And
can't wait to dive into that. That's going to be great.
I want to read that specific story that I told you about in the text message. The one that was mentioned, I think it's about 20 pages. I checked in the page count on that specific story. I want to read that one specifically because it looked intriguing. Again, on I think Ocean of PDF, Jeff, those are the two sites, PDF Drive and Ocean of PDF. That's where I find all these resources. You go there, type in Hermann Hesse, and you'll see all of his books. It was on Ocean of PDF though. I'm sure I remember that now.
Okay.
Cool. All right, we'll get
I
you
look
wrapping
forward
up.
to it. And Art,
I'll see y'all on Wednesday then. My Wednesday.
your
Wednesday or Tuesday.
Art, thank you so much. Once
Yes.
again, it was an honor. I'll see you on his Wednesday too, or Tuesday.
Sounds good.
My head is spinning, so thank you.
You're welcome. You guys have a great night. Look forward to seeing you guys again soon.
You too.
All right. You all have the night. You enjoy your night first. I'll enjoy my day.
You have a good Saturday.
Sounds good.